any good attorney would, I would like to start this with a disclaimer. I have a terrible sounding cough, and I'm not contagious anymore, 3 weeks out, but apologies in advance. I love words. I love the power of words to invoke ideas and thoughts and feelings and action. I love crafting messages through the careful composition of a few select words from an infinite variety of potential combinations. I love learning what is most salient to me through the pouring of words from my heart and my head through my body and fingers into a space that allows me to review and reflect upon what I have written and what I have thought and what I have felt. May Sarton, a 20th century poet and author, said, quote, "I write novels to understand what I think, and I write poems to understand what I feel." Unquote. I appreciate that perspective. I love words. I also love paintings and sketches. Sadly, I have absolutely no facility with the latter, and so what I presume to share with you today is a collection of portraits through words. These portraits are a mosaic of words designed to paint a picture with my own form of brushstroke of some remarkable and treasured people I have loved and who have died. I do this not from a place of highlighting my pain or seeking your pity, but rather because it is my hope that these portraits will inspire in each of you at least one idea or thought or feeling upon which you choose to reflect or act. In this way, I also hope to contribute to their legacy, because they, like all of us, deserve to have the meaning of their lives observed and noted. Beginning in November of 2021 through September of 2022, 5 people I loved died. They are all included in today's thoughts and appear in no particular order. A bit of context about each of them may be helpful. The first portrait is about Ambrose. Ambrose was a friend and a mentor and a beloved inspiration. He began an international effort among international schools to visit the Kalahari Desert in South Africa and to train teachers to educate the children who lived in the middle of nowhere, literally. Not only did they educate educators, but over the years they built schools and a health clinic and a hospital and a soccer field. At the time he began this effort, the government of South Africa did not even recognize the little towns that were dotted throughout the area in which we worked. This consortium of international schools was made up of European and Australian schools until I learned about it. I wrote to Ambrose in my capacity as an administrator of an international school, and he and I developed a correspondence until he invited me and another teacher from the school where I worked to join him on a trip into the Kalahari to better understand what he saw and loved about the place. The result was that our school became and remains the only school from the U.S. to take part in what is now known internationally as the Kalahari Experience. He happened to know the area well because he was a Quaker teacher who taught, radical though it was, peaceful nonviolence during the apartheid era, despite the extreme danger to himself and to his students. He was eventually caught and horribly tortured. Despite that, he continued to work in South Africa, and when he moved to Germany with his German wife, his heart remained in South Africa, and thus began his Kalahari efforts. I was privileged to participate in several trips to the Kalahari Desert, where I taught math teachers how to break down complicated math lessons, and also reviewed the K-12 curriculum for the South African government as it was being executed in these small schools with almost no resources, but a great deal of enthusiasm, grit, and determination. Ambrose. Behind his glasses, those sparkling and mischievous eyes glinted between his lopsided whiskers. Hasten slowly, he would say, drove me nuts. His patience and his unflappable good humor and optimism, I wanted change. I wanted results. He trusted that they would happen with time. Don't lose sight of where you're going, but have patience with those who need more time, he would say. Was this a reflection of who he was or of his life experience? Both, I suspect. He talked often and longingly about Australia, where he was born, and the gentle, purposefully slow-mannered people with whom he grew up. I don't think this job is big enough for you, is it, Laura? He asked me as we looked up at the Southern Cross. With those words, he pierced my longing into 1,000 shards that were not at all painful, but dangerously insightful. Those shards drifted into the night sky and illuminated where we sat, and I saw what was possible through his eyes. I saw a brighter version of myself, and I loved him. There was a little boy in the class I observed today who ate a pencil. I told him as I wept, both because of the poverty revealed, but also because I was feeling ashamed that I was as old as I was before knowing that such a thing could happen. I watched him chew everything but the lead, I gulped. He nodded slowly. Yes, there's cellulose in the wood. He said it so matter-of-factly. A sense of knowing that which should be unthinkable haunts me to this day. I haven't told anybody about my torture, he whispered. But I wanted you to know. I hear his need to be witnessed, and I become wrapped up in the horror that he weaves with his words until they envelop both of us in a shroud of darkness, both a memory and a portent of what we humans can do to one another. Look at that, he said in awe to me and my young daughters. This is my favorite place on earth because you can see so far into the distance. You can actually see the curvature of the earth. We stood there, observing, unmoving, and not speaking for almost an hour. I love you, he told me one afternoon. I think of you as my wife, the wife I chose. And I wonder as I sit with him what she, the wife who chose him, would think of his choice. This is so exciting, he gushed as we prepared for the 10th meeting we'd had with governmental clerks in order to get a small town, Padstow, recognized and placed on the map of the region, because this was the first step in South African bureaucracy to getting services such as electricity and running water to the thousands of people who lived there. We did a little jig in the parking lot, and it was impossible not to smile and to hope, to dream large and to act on those dreams, to smile often and beatifically, believing that anything and everything is possible, to marvel at the wonders of our earth, to cry in front of somebody's pain, and to drive like a madman with a vulnerably sick woman in the back seat to a hospital that was more aspirational than provisional in the middle of the desert, to listen to a gauche woman from North America and see in her the promise of a thread of hope, to delight in her idealism and to view it as a strength. This is what he gave to me. He was and always will be for me a beacon of hope and love and purpose and action. A beacon of life and a life well lived. Heather is next. Heather was the executive director of the Board on Aging and Long-Term Care Ombuds program for the state of Wisconsin. She reached out to me initially in my consulting capacity. Heather. You are brilliant, she gushed after attending a 2-hour training I had presented to her entire state agency. I liked her immediately. I'm so glad you found it useful, I said. No, really, she continued, holding my hand. You are very insightful. I want to bring you back to do more trainings. Do you do other trainings? She asked. With long, blonde brown hair swinging below her shoulders and a calm, confident demeanor, she exuded certainty that she was doing work that was useful. And as I later learned, that she was parenting a remarkable and treasured daughter, her only child, named Lauren Hope. Asking Heather about Lauren Hope later, I saw, as though reflected in a mirror, the joy and delight I always feel when somebody asks me about my daughters. I recognized that bond. I thought, I am blessed. She said at least once every 10 to 15 minutes, and it was sincere, so sincerely spoken and believed and lived and personified. I have tumors in my lungs that began growing after the birth of Lauren Hope, she shared with remarkable candor at our first shared breakfast, where we were ostensibly meeting to discuss another training. In reality, we were two middle-aged women with young daughters who liked one another immensely and who found it difficult to focus on the reason for the time we had set aside and justified in our busy workday calendars. There's no cure, she continued, but there's medicine that has slowed down the growth. I gain weight on the medicine, she grimaces, but every day with Lauren Hope is so worth it. I'm so blessed. Dumbfounded, I look at her and she appears so calm, so poised and gracious and happy. She's such a beautiful person, and she has been slowly dying for the last, at that point in time, 11 years. How does she smile and laugh, I wonder to myself. I marvel that any of us get out of bed in the morning. There's so much going on for everybody I meet, and we rarely have any inkling of what anybody else is managing. Simply to be out and about in the world, I feel honored to be trusted with such intimate information. My phone rings. It's Heather. Hi, Laura, she says with so much enthusiasm, I almost feel guilty it isn't my birthday or a holiday. She greets me as though our mere connection is worthy of a celebration. She explains the reason for her call. I heard something the other day about a new philosophy of leadership, and I told my staff, I bet Laura knows about this and can explain to me whether or not it's something I should know about. So I'm calling you to ask, do you know about? And I did. I shared with her my thoughts about the theory, and she sat with the information as she always did and then said, thank you. I knew you would know. You're so great. You're welcome, I said. You do wonders for my self-esteem, Heather. We spent another marvelous and all too quick 90 minutes together. No work pretense this time. I'm moving to Idaho and we've met to say goodbye. We both know, without acknowledging it, that we're unlikely to ever see each other again. The growths have increased and she has just been diagnosed with breast cancer. We talk, we laugh, we cry. She stands up first. We move slowly to our cars and part ways, and then, as though in a dramatic movie, she runs back to my car, motions to me to roll down my window, sticks her head in the car and says, love you, Laura. I hope you know that. I love you too, I say, with tears streaming down my face. Grace and beauty. She personified acceptance and gratitude and a tremendous work ethic and powerful parental love. She faced death every day. For almost 2 decades, knowingly and courageously and beautifully. She made me feel as though I was an invaluable and beautiful person. She gave me friendship and love without asking for anything in return. Positivity and courage. These are the gifts she role modeled for me. Schubert. Schubert was my uncle, my mother's brother. Many of you may know of him because for 6 years, my parents drove down to Chicago every 3 weeks to visit with him and coordinate his care. He lived in a nursing home not far from where he spent most of his adult life. Schubert. Where's your suitcase? A much younger me asks of my Uncle John. This is it, he says, pointing to a small dot kit stuffed into his right armpit. I quickly intuit that neither verbal diarrhea nor overpacking plagued this man. In fact, trying to come up with a comment or a question that would motivate him to respond with more than 3 or 4 words proved to be a challenge and one that I accepted. He had flown to Florida from Chicago for a 2-night stay and carried with him only a toilet kit, not even a book. I found this remarkable. The next day, I'm from the back seat of the car. I lean forward and touch him on the shoulder. I've decided you need a nickname, I tell him. Oh, he responds. the length of which is a bit disappointing, but not surprising. Yep, I persevere. Your nickname is Schubert. He turns around at this, like the musician with a C. 5 words and a letter. Nope, I say Schubert, like Uncle John's nickname, no C. The number of times this man smiled was commensurate with his number of long and winded expostulations. I'm pretty sure, though, that I saw a small uptick in the left-hand corner of his upper lip, despite his disappointment that I wasn't honoring him with the name of a highly regarded musician. He was a tall and large man and contributed the only height, other than his father, my maternal grandfather, to grace our family. He also had curly hair. I'd like to thank him for that. I enjoy most of the time the fact that I have curly hair. As he lay in the hospital, he looked a lot shorter. I love you, Schubert, I said. With a grimace, he hurled and said, I don't know what love is. Yes, you do, I said. It's my mom and dad driving 12 hours round trip every 3 weeks and taking you to doctor's appointments. It's them buying you your favorite donuts. It's me and my kids showing up to hang out with you. Silence. I love you, Schubert, I repeated, mostly so that his silence didn't get the last word. What's your favorite drink? I asked. Coffee and chocolate milk, he said. No, that's my favorite drink, too, I gushed. He smiled. Slow, huge smile. In public, a lot of people refer to this drink as a mocha. But between the two of us and in private, we understood that we had each respectively and individually concocted a marvelously unique drink. There was very little he couldn't find to complain about. And I knew he loved me. On occasion, and with the right question or comment, he could and would pontificate thoughtfully and knowledgeably about a remarkably diverse set of subjects. And when he forgot to catch himself, he often smiled in my general direction. Persistence, optimism, unyielding love. The gifts he gave to me were evidence that persistent optimism, even in the face of remarkably grouchy behavior, can poke holes in a person's unhappy facade and reveal their inner light. And that if you decide not to let somebody else's negativity wear you down and out, it's possible, sometimes, to help them find moments of happiness without giving up your right to be exactly who you want to be. And sometimes, when we show up as exactly who we are in front of somebody else we really don't understand, and we don't ask them to change, beautiful moments can happen. And the hair. I do appreciate the courage. Shannon. Shannon was my dear friend in college my sophomore year and my best friend my junior year. Shannon, it's move-in day. I'm a junior in college and I'm moving back into a house just off campus that's organized around a commitment by all who live there to dedicate a few hours every week either to children and or adults who move through their lives navigating significant neurodivergence and physical challenges. As I'm headed to my room, I see a photo on the door of the most coveted room in the house, a single with a window and a view. The photo is one of my housemates, Shannon. She is standing on the side of the road with John Denver's arm slung casually around her shoulders as though this were a normal day. John Denver. I sang along with him as a young child and growing teen, and well, still do. And there he was. I dropped my box and poked my head inside the room. Shannon, tell me about this picture. You met John Denver? Obviously. She was lovely. With as much animation as the experience clearly warranted, she regaled me with a fabulous story about how she and her family on a summer vacation drove right past John Denver as he was out for a jog. Not only did she convince her father to pull their RV over to the side of the road almost immediately, but she then jumped out, ran after John Denver, and in her words, gushed all over him, the result of which was this photo. I lived with another housemate friend that year, but it was Shannon who became my best friend. We had talked before and enjoyed each other's company, and somehow that moment catapulted us into one conversation after another, the way it can when we recognize a soul who both speaks to us and who also seems to see us. Shannon, with her long blonde hair, her easy smile, and her love of singing along with me to John Denver songs, she just made sense to me. I told myself I wouldn't cry, she sobbed into my ear years later when, with 2 young children each, I visited her and her family in Colorado. We were both crying, our tears intermingling and our arms wrapped tightly around each other, and the years melted away. We talked all day. I'm pretty sure my kiddos and their dad were there too. My memories, though, are of a beautiful reunion with a beautiful soul who knew me before I was a parent and before I was even really a fully fledged adult. She knew a younger and more carefree and less responsible me. And in her reflection, I could both bask in her company and also snatch glimpses of my quickly disappearing memory of that version of me. We should fix your light fixture, she said, apropos of absolutely nothing many years later, except that we had both walked down into the basement of my home in Appleton, Wisconsin, where the light had burned out, thus making the normally routine journey a bit more exciting than it normally was. It wasn't the bulbs. I'd already tried replacing them. It was years later. Our children were in college, and we sat around my kitchen table drinking the lovely wine that another friend had gifted to me months earlier. As a single parent for a very long time, I admit that my fondness for household repairs had waned over the years, and there hadn't been much energy behind them to begin with. Suddenly, with Shannon, I felt empowered and less alone, and it didn't seem at all ridiculous to spend a few of our precious hours together roaming around and giggling our way through the aisles of a Menards that was larger than a city block with the old fixture, so that we could more readily identify its replacement. We really had no idea what we were doing. After standing in front of many options for many moments, giggling haplessly over our astonishing lack of intelligence regarding this repair, an employee took pity on us, and we checked out moments later with a new fixture we were assured was close enough to the poor relic dragging on the ground. And then there was light, I declared, oh so unoriginally. We had replaced the fixture, and I felt ridiculously satisfied. She and I stood there, arms around each other's waists, and looked up at the now functioning light in its new fixture and grinned at each other. What's next? She asked. Giggling, the laughter that pours forward in the company of trusted friends over the smallest of moments. Hugs, and a knowing over decades that she would welcome me into her arms and I her into mine whenever our paths might cross. Shannon gave me the gift of a beautiful friendship, asking nothing of me but my company and my love. She taught me that with a few precious people, it doesn't matter what we do together. It matters only that we are together. And that a few hours in the company of somebody who sees us and knows us and loves us can help us to feel good about ourselves and our place in the world for years to come. Finally, Papa. Papa was my father-in-law. Papa. There he sat on the couch with rings on his fingers and a gold chain around his neck, just reading on a Saturday afternoon. Just hit me hard. He was sitting on a Saturday afternoon as though that were a normal thing to do. Something so relaxing on a weekend afternoon. And he wore jewelry. I was intrigued. I went to sit next to him on the couch and he looked up and smiled. Ever so casually, he draped his arm around my shoulder, and after meeting him only a couple of times before, I rested my head on his shoulder. Papa, the father of my boyfriend, and eventually, and for 2 decades, my father-in-law. That is just your opinion, he said with barely contained exasperation. Of course, that's my opinion, I responded, with all the certainty of a young adult and a good dose of withering contempt. Calling it an opinion doesn't mean it isn't true, I yelled. And so it went. We argued frequently about politics, the state of the world, the value of money, what it means to have power, and we loved each other profoundly. He was proud of me, and he told me so. He loved my daughters. We would arrive at his place road-weary and grumpy, and he would meet us at the door and throw open his arms to my two rainbows, and they would hurtle into him, often with endlessly runny noses and sticky fingers, and he would scoop them both up simultaneously, and with a smile so beautifully brilliant, it was distracting. He appreciated really nice clothes and was always richly adorned. With my daughters, he could have mucus covering his shirt, and he didn't flinch. This was love. Run, Grandpa, run, my daughters yelled. I don't run, he said quite casually. Stunning. This was stunning. Not only to my two daughters, but to me. He was only 55. Why don't you run? I asked. I don't have to, he said. True, I responded, but that is not why most of us run, I explained as though to a young and painfully obtuse human. Running is fun. It's an expression of freedom and joy, I continued. I don't run, he said again, not since I turned 50. What happened when you turned 50? I asked. I decided I was done running. Fascinating. Who decides to decide such things? Pop, evidently. He was astonishingly intelligent and remembered, well, everything we talked about. When I first met him, I was a teenager, and I conflated intelligence with a worldview that mirrored my own. His worldview did not mirror my own, and yet he appeared to be intelligent. I struggled with this for years. You've got two really impressive daughters, he said, hugging me years after our formal ties had been severed. I know, I said ever so humbly. We grinned at each other. Here was a man I loved deeply, who lived a life according to values I often judged negatively. He gave me the gift of knowing deeply and well a thoughtful, intelligent, and loving man who rarely agreed with me. I will forever appreciate his willingness to argue with me loudly and passionately. He taught me that we can disagree fervently without venom or contempt or hatred. We both learned over time to respect each other's right, to believe what we did, to disagree, and to keep right on loving each other.
Our closing words are An Unquenchable Flame by Ben Atherton Zeman. As we extinguish the flame of our chalice, we ignite it inside ourselves. Our commitment to our mission with one another is an unquenchable flame. Let us remember that we are not alone until we light this flame next time.